Welcome back from that short break, and right on time, I guess it's already seated. Engineer Dr. Eragbe Anslem. A very good day to you, comrade. I'll have to call you comrade because you're also comrade of Nigerian Labour Congress and other affiliate. Welcome to the show.
All right, thank you. First and foremost, I'm a trained engineer, a metallurgical materials engineer.
That's a good one. So, and you are quite very suited for this discussion because mining sector is one of the areas that you metallurgical and mineral and material analysts normally focus. But over the years, what is your assessment of Nigerian economy? Let's start from that angle because we are talking about the economy and what the mining have done. But in assessment of Nigerian economy, in the first quarter, let's put it first quarter first. How have you assessed Nigerian economy first quarter?
Well, I think probably there have been appreciable improvement in the Nigerian economy, and that is equal to the federal government's effort. There have been a lot of collaboration. The president has done well in this respect to reach out to the global community, and there are influx of foreign investors into Nigeria to invest in these aspects. Different mining fields are being exploited. Operations are ongoing. They are preliminary stages. Some are already in full operation. So, but the most important thing here is the whole intent of all of this is to create the enable environment that increase job creation for the youth of this country. So I think it may not be so obvious to everybody, but for those in the field and sectors, you will know that the government is doing much in this direction.
Exactly, and you are one of those people in that field, and that's why we bring you on board. Now, talking about the mining sector properly, from what you are giving us the review of the Nigerian economy, which now just oppose the current effort in the mining sector. But for the mining sector, in my intro of this discussion today, I recall that in the 60s, 70s, mining was one of the beacon of our economic development. But at the discovery of crude oil, we left it. Then, right now, the target of the government is about 3% to ensure that also added to the GDP. But in your own understanding as someone who is in that field, beyond just the revenue that government is also making, and beyond just dragging or attracting investors, what else do you see that the government is doing to ensure that this sector comes to life as far as what we were experiencing in the 60s and 70s?
Well, basically, government policies are key to the extent to which any and every economy would grow. First and foremost is workable policies. Exactly. Your policies must have investment phase. They must be investment friendly to the point where it can attract investors. Every country needs foreign investors.
Exactly. True.
Even the US, the developed nations, they themselves need investors at different levels because either you need them in the form of human capacity, professionals who have developed themselves, acquired skills in different aspects of their fields into your country, just like you see the influx, or let's say the outflux of medical workers from Nigeria, basically to developed nations. So similarly, we are attracting experts in mineral processing, exploration, and exploitation. So exploration to the point where there are a lot of technologies for exploration, the seismic technologies, and so many. We have the electroscopic, that's scanning electroscopy technology, where metals could be detected using the same method. And there are many technologies, the aerospace technology method. So all of these are ongoing to be able to isolate the kinds of mineral. There are over 108 elements on the periodic table, classified into metals and non-metals. Metals, of course, you know the common one, the steel, which we call the alloy steel. We have ferrous and non-ferrous metals. Ferrous metals are those whose carbon content are to a certain level. Then you have the non-ferrous metal, basically the other grades of metal. Now you still have what you call the transition metals. Now these are precious metals that attract, boost value because of the nature of the octet, the configuration of their electronic structure. They expand and able to do so many other things. Different energy levels are attained at this level to perform different operations. So you have things like the californium, things like the uranium, and all of these transition metals used for a lot of technologies. Technologies like the power sector to generate power, to do so many things. So in the medical fields, in the engineering field, in all of these fields, you find them applicable. So you have materials also. Materials, there are different kinds of materials. Find application in different use. In the construction industry, for instance, when I mean construction, probably the building, the roads, another aspect of technologies. So all of these materials find different application to the extent where Nigeria is endowed majorly. You see, Nigeria is about the most endowed country on the surface of the earth, because there are a few countries where you can find the kinds of mineral endowment you find in Nigeria. Ours is not just finding, you have them in commercial quantity. Because what's important in every endowment is if they exist in commercial quantity. So, but the good news in Nigeria is that you have all of this in commercial quantity. But what we have lacked actually, as of today, Nigeria does not lack the technical capacity to exploit these minerals. No, but what we have lacked, which I think this government is majoring on, is harnessing this human capacity we have built over time and deploying them to exploit the natural endowment in such a way they become beneficial to both the communities, both the government, and everybody in it. For instance,
sorry, having caught you in that regard.
It's okay.
From all your explanations so far, something just popped up in my mind. I said, we have a Jakarta Steel Company, and with all that you have said so far, how come that we are not making use of it to produce steel, to produce other products, as Ajakuta lay fallow?
Now, actually, I wasn't oblivious of the earlier question you asked when it had to do with the oil, crude oil, which was discovered sometimes, is it the late 50s, yes. 56, 57 at Oloibiri, now in Bayelsa State, where you see, Nigeria, some of the things we missed. First and foremost, we missed the governance structure or system. Nigeria operated regional government in those eras, and we must consciously return Nigeria to that era of regional government. Why was it so? Under that government, the regions explored and exploited their natural potentials, added value, made money, developed themselves. You agree with me that the region, apart from FCT and probably Lagos, that have enjoyed the federal government intervention in terms of national development, the regions fared better that time. For instance, the arable land in northern Nigeria was mechanized. And northern Nigeria made about the highest volume of revenue in terms of agricultural produce. So consciously, these things must be replicated. We must return to them. Because if you look at the population with which Nigeria, the northern Nigeria grew at that pace and made those revenue, and you compare the population we have today, you find out that we had more than 10 times more than that earlier population. So what that means is, ideally, we should have been producing and earning 10 times more than we earned from these regions in the 60s. So, but because of the crude oil, everybody abandoned the natural endowment. We abandoned our system of government and adopted a unitary system. For me, the concept of the unitary system of government we adopted in Nigeria was to the extent of exploiting the resource. Because why? The oil money has not been put into use effectively in Nigeria. It's obvious. So what we found is a situation where people in government started stealing. So the Commonwealth have been stolen. There is no accountability the way it should be. There are no proper accounting. For instance, I know we have NATI, the Nigeria Extractive Industry, Transparency International, and some of these other parastatals whose roles ideally are to account for these minerals, their exploitation, the revenues they generate, and their usage. But however, these things are not done properly because we have missed it. There's no ownership. So yeah, we claim that the federal government own it, but that is the reason people are bothered to go into siphoning Commonwealth. So the idea is, for me, is this: let us consciously return back to the basis. And what are the basis? We have, for instance, Nigeria has a land of 923,000 square kilometers, for which over 70% of that land is arable, and the land is underutilized. So just by mechanization of agriculture, plant, animal husbandry processes, Nigeria can sustain itself. Nigeria can generate all the revenues it needs to generate to sustain itself, and probably extend its gesture by feeding, are you getting not just Nigeria but the entire Africa, any foreign reserves, exchange, adding value to. So now coming back to the minerals, you see, there are a lot of crises in the country. Maybe I may add the perspective because we are dealing with the subject of minerals and the role of the government. The insecurity in northern Nigeria that's probably pervaded the entire country is not religious. It's economics. The economics is centered around precious metals within certain aspects. For instance, the northeast zone, you see, the Adamawa, the Borno, Kaduna, all these axes, you have the insurgency. Zamfara, the real thing there is that people are mining gold. People are mining precious metals and cutting away these precious metals in their volume daily. So this is the bane of the insurgency we have in Nigeria. So what the government needs to do, ideally, is we have to face it squarely. We ensure that these foreigners who are in our country mining these minerals, I mean, we need to know them. If they have the technology, we need to sit with them. Are you getting it? Work out a business policy or a business plan between Nigeria and this person so that they bring those technologies, do it officially. What is due to them be given to them. What is due to the country be given to the country. Similarly, the states and the local government, where these states are. So, but I know, like I said, for instance, the policies of part of the policy there on the cadastral mining.
That's one of the latest, effort of the government, which has also helped the government. The earning they have earned so far, just this first quarter, is recognized on that cadastral mining policy. Go ahead.
Because the cadastral mining policy, you see, there are regulatory policies that have been updated very recently by this government. And that update has attracted a lot of investment because when you have an up-to-date mining cadastre, what it means, and it's accessible, is the world will look at it. People have needs for different things. For instance, all the wares we are dealing with, the phones, the laptops, the computer, the TV, all of these daily goods we use, they are made from some of these metals, which we have in abundance. So needless to say, there is no precious metal or metal of value that we don't have in Nigeria. So what this government has identified that potential and has recently updated the mining cadastre. That on its own has started bringing investors in concrete terms. Mining leases and licenses have been issued to the extent that they are now tied to the economic benefits of the locality, the state, and the government. To the extent where jobs are now being created. You see, the level of job creation has increased relatively, probably in the last 12 months, by reason of this singular fact I stated. Because over 900 and close to 1,000 mining licenses and leases have been issued. And most of them, as I'm talking, are in operation. So foreign exchange is coming. When you look at the present value of the earnings from solid minerals, you will agree that yes, something is really happening in that sector. So, but it really needs to translate more, such that the government should sustain it.
Exactly, and that's the bulk of our question. Because when I asked earlier in the introduction, is that beyond just the earning, how can we have value addition? But not talking about value addition, Doc. Recently, the Raw Material Research Council went to National Assembly with a new bill, and the new bill is that whatever mineral resources anybody is exporting in Nigeria should have a 30% value added.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, again, I'll come to that. You talked about the Ajaokuta State. I'm a trained metallurgical and materials engineer. Ideally, I'm a process metallurgist. So the Ajaokuta State you mentioned is my core aspect. So some of us, it pains some of us because that's our own core aspect in engineering. And ordinarily, Ajaokuta holds the economic life wire of this nation. Ajaokuta were functional. Ajaokuta Steel Complex were functional at a time, probably in the early 80s to maybe early 80s to the 90s. I remember in 2000, in my 300 level, or my 300 or 400 level, no, 400 level, I did my Sideways 1 there. I was there for 7 months. Where I praised and appreciated the enormity of the steel plant and its processes. Because it is one thing for you to learn by theory, then another thing for you to visit the steel plant and to see the operations from the raw material handling section to the steel sections, the blast furnace, the rolling mills, all of those things, and the stored capacity 1.3 million metric ton of steel annually. So if you look at the price of steel, ideally, and you imagine that Ajaokuta were functional, you can appropriate the expected revenue to this nation, which will have enormous impact on the people, on the national development, and all of this development will ideally have removed the issue of insecurity we're having. For instance, you have the aluminium smelter plant in Kotabasi that is lying idle also. So you have steel plants here and there, the Shobo steel, you have a Katsina rolling mill, the Jos rolling mill. So all of these are subsidiaries that will have been fed from the primary operation of the Ajaokuta steel. So we must, my advice to this country is, professionalism should be tied to politics. The reason some of us are doing what we are doing, this is the real reason. Because we need that ventilation, we need that leverage, even as politicians, to be able to display our wealth of knowledge. So, and you cannot administer a country without knowledge. Even the Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So the destruction we have suffered and still suffering in this country is because people think in politics. For instance, sorry, I have to veer a bit because it's important. Not minding we are talking about economics, but anywhere in the world, you can't talk about economics without leadership, effective leadership. A leadership with skill, leadership with capacity. So we must consciously, you see, at the level of legislation, because all of these things we are talking about will not make sense if those at the National Assembly don't know the value of what we are talking about. Because it is by the enabling legislation, for instance, that anything can be meaningful in Nigeria. That is one part of it. But the executive, on the other hand, must be able to implement policies. So, but to come back to the issues of issues you raised, well, I think I've been able to see a few things about for instance, the oil sector. At the time, in the military era, 4 major refineries were built that are now moribund. For God's sake, there is no reason why a liter of fuel, for instance, should sell for more than 50 naira in Nigeria. Under no circumstance, ordinarily. Why? Because Nigeria is endowed with the crude oil. That is one. So it then means Nigeria needed to build a capacity to exploit the crude oil, even in joint venture partnership, the way it has been doing. But the component of local refining should be a different matter altogether when it has to do with how much volume. Nigeria, for instance, the recent daily production, it's about 1.7 million or 73 million barrels of crude oil per day. For instance, you have the Dangote refinery, for instance, that has been cited in Nigeria. If we have more of that, both modular and the rest of them proliferated, and this crude oil are sold to them at a very commensurate, are you getting it? Yes, comparable local rate, such that production at the local level can be optimal to the extent where we can meet our daily need. Because for me, there is no reason why a liter of PMS be sold for 1,000 naira in Nigeria. There is no reason. Materially and metallurgically, professionally speaking. So, but maybe on another day we have to talk about this. Exactly. So that I try to measure. I'm just trying to digress so that we see some of. Though the government, like we, at the time the issues were coming up with the Dangote refinery, and there were a lot of. I had to make a public position on that matter. On why the federal government, under His Excellency President Tinubu, needed to ensure that the Dangote refinery got the needed crude oil it needed for refining locally to meet the daily need. Because the reason for that is the cheaper locally the price of the PMS is, the more stable the local economy will be. Exactly. Because the Nigerian economy is dependent absolutely on the crude oil price. Such that if the crude oil prices drops today, let's say by 50%, it will have a tremendous positive impact on the economy. Exactly. So that way, a lot of small businesses will be sustained. Because I tell you, a liter of fuel, for instance, a lot of businesses are run on fuel generators. So I can't imagine how many liters of fuel anybody will buy a day to run gen these days. Exactly. So even if you could buy it, you are not sure of even recovering the investment in the fuel consumption per day because of the expected patronage. So these are issues that have to be dealt with very strategically by by this government. I want to encourage the government to say these are some of the lines in which they have to do. First, they have taken good measures in the fields of mineral endowment in this country by readdressing the matters of mining cadastre, because it has a multiplier effect. Because when you go into an operation, there is the environmental aspect, there is the job creation aspect, there is the revenue generation aspect, there is the foreign exchange earning aspect. So there is the national development aspect. For instance, if the steel sector were working, it means because these things will be more affordable, more people can build houses. More roads can be constructed in record time. Quality material, you see, the quality of material is another thing altogether. Because most of the substandard materials that found their way into the Nigerian economy is as a result of the fact that standards. That's another matter. Yes, standards against another matter. Because when you open your borders and you begin to import all manner of things, the first thing that happens to you is the quality of the product you import are not guaranteed.
Exactly, as we have been having the challenge of being a dumping ground for a very long time. But Doc, let's begin to look at preferable solutions. Although you have mentioned some of them, strategic effort towards ensuring that the mining cadastre are maintained and sustained, so that foreign direct investment will keep rolling in. But beyond that also is the issue of the policy. I asked you the question about the raw material research and what they are talking about. And on the other side of it is that we shouldn't just be exploring these resources, then we're giving them out in the raw form or at the primary level alone. We need to go into the secondary and the tertiary aspect. So let's begin to look at solutions in that regard.
Thank you very much. Just like you alluded to recently, the National Assembly, there was a bill. I think I was in that session in Senate, the Senate wing, sometimes February, I can't remember the date, but I attended that program where the bill that called for 30% value addition to raw material was okay. That was the
title of the bill.
Yeah, the plenary session. Yeah, I was in that session with my leader, Professor Tisianu Ndubwaku, the GS of the Academic Staff Union of Research Institutions in Nigeria. He made a simple presentation on our behalf. So you see, again, those are some of the policy frameworks that are necessary in times like this. Because the reason for that is, first and foremost, if we must have value for our efforts, then it means we must have value to raw materials. And added value to raw material means, one, you will create jobs, because human beings are required to carry out these operations. That is one. Then in doing that, you build capacity of the people. So it means the people need to be skilled to a certain level, because adding value means bringing skills on board. And bringing skills on board means capacity building. So it means low and medium level staff will have to be trained at different levels, both locally and internationally. So when these things begin to happen, you find out that one, you will have created jobs, two, you will have added value, two, the value you have added prepares you to earn better at the international market. So these are the advantages of that bill, which was applauded. But we pray and hope that
you see the light of day.
You see the light of day.
Because there are a lot of sharks that are trying to tempt on the bill and say no, although we have taken a look at the merit of the bill. So let's let National Assembly do that. But on the other angle to this mining sector of Nigerian economy, also look at the aspect of government himself. A lot of time we say government doesn't have business in business. But we also see that there is benefit when government on its own, which is own enterprise, are also involved, not just in the mining, but in turning those materials into finished products. So what's your take on that?
Well, you see, in Nigeria, most of these matters are on the exclusive legislative list.
Exactly.
And that gives power to the federal government. But what the government needs to do is, yes, the reform in that direction should be, let us look at which of these matters should be in the exclusive legislative list controlled by the government, and which should be ceded to the states and local government. So this is key, it's fundamental. Now, for instance, maybe as a metallurgical engineer, we will find things like, say, uranium, thorium, the radioactive elements, because of their high sensitivity and operational use. these are materials of national security and global security interest. Because just a gram of any of these materials, when in operation, can destroy probably the entire country. Yes, because of its radioactive
volume of its radioactivity,
its radioactivity and its chain reaction operations, if malhandled. So, by this reason, there should be a legislation that is not able to, probably with the recent work they are doing concerning the cadastral updates and other policy framework they have instituted in this government, isolate some of this by information that should be on the exclusive legislative list, such that before such are tampered with, there has to be a serious diplomatic partnership. For instance, Nigeria does not have power, and we have metals here in this country, from what I know, for which setting up things like nuclear reactors for power generation, I mean, it's very tenable. The nuclear reactors that could be set up it may not be the gigantic.
Like the one they set up in Benue State for over 3 decades. Nobody know anything about it.
You see, in Nigeria, most times we embark on white elephant projects because we politicize everything. Yes, there should be professionalism to these things I'm talking about, particularly metals, because of their sensitivity and their importance to global economy and warfare. You see, you don't, for instance, I just ventured into, I don't want to spread my technicality. I don't want to come too technical because if you are a metallurgist, you will know that the steel sector is the anchor for any economy globally, and that is the powerhouse of the United States and the Russia and the rest of them. Yes, because it is the steel sector. It's not the oil. The oil is a wasting commodity. Yes, even like I said, it's just to power, but the technology to be great is resident in the metal industry. So, and in this metal industry, both ferrous and non-ferrous and materials is where God has endowed Nigeria most abundantly. So, like I said, for me, maybe I'm saying some of these things because that's my own training. You can see the pain I have because I may not want to go too deep, but I'm just saying this to say Nigeria must consciously have a rethink. Go back to its policy framework, identify, categorize. Maybe some of us may have to send some, by reason of this discussion anyway, we may have to make input to some of the things. Some will not say here. To say government do A, do B, do C, because we are aspiring government people.
Exactly.
I'm an aspiring president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So and these are some of the policies and more that I have in my own policy document for implementation in Nigeria. So let the framework be right. Let there be investment and partnership, because it has to be by partnership. Because the essence of partnership is you will need to bring in investors who will come with both the know-how, the technical know-how, and the financial capability.
Exactly.
Invest in Nigeria and make a return.
Exactly.
Empower our people.
Conveyed engineer, I can't thank you enough. Time is not enough for us. I know if we have enough opportunity, we'll dive into that aspect that will help us to really understand the steel industry of Nigeria. Because a lot of Nigerians are, anytime people travel past Ajakuta, to that area of people weep. A lot of people go through that, they will tell me, that's billions of naira
for instance,
just wasting.
Quickly, maybe, because you mentioned, maybe I start getting into the matter discussion. For instance, the slag section. For instance, Ajakuta has an installed capacity of 1.3 million metric ton of steel. Now, the waste from the blast furnace process of steel making is called slag. Now, the slag from that steel process is, of course, is what you call today cement. Why is it so? Because, limestone, you burn limestone, calcium oxide, and when you sinter, that's you beneficiate the iron ore. That's by concentrating it. Beneficiation is a process of concentrating the iron ore. Because it has ganges, it has other impurities, but you try and under beneficiation you concentrate the iron up to 60%. Thereafter you go into the process of sintering. So under that process you have to bring in other materials that we extract the metal Fe from the ore itself. So by that operation, you have limestone being crushed, fired, burnt, and mixed with the iron ore that has been beneficiated. Now, once that happens, of course, you form them. You know they are granulated. You form them into what is called pellets or sinters before they go into the blast furnace. Now, when they go into the blast furnace at a temperature of over 1,530 degrees, you are able to distill the Fe from under that temperature. Now, the slag, because like I said, the reason I had to make this little explanation is because I talked about the slag from the process to say it will account for about the highest tonnage of cement production in Nigeria. So all the cement companies in Nigeria put together are not able to produce the slag, which is a waste. Are you with me? And that slag, of course, will give you about the highest quality of cement because of the percentage of the calcium oxide
that is inside.
Yes, that is inside. Then to be added with other materials, the binders and the rest of them. But let's not go into this.
Exactly, because of time.
The value addition from any metal operation are enormous. Just any. Just for instance, aluminum silicate, which is the electrode, that's the red sand. You see the clay soil. The clay you see, the normal clay in maybe a do all of this area. It's in FCT when you go to Caterpillar extension, good on that axis, on your right axis, you see that red sand called clay. You know, that is the main component for cement. It constitutes about 90% of cement.
We'll leave it at that today. But I hope very soon we'll still bring you back so that we can look at the deeper aspect of the steel industry in Nigeria and what it normally contributes to the economy. Because steel is still out of the mining sector that we are talking about. I've been speaking with the comrade engineer Anslem Eragbe. He is a metallurgical and material engineer, and also he doubled as a politician who has been one of the past immediate national youth leader of Labour Party. But we are not talking about politics today. But you can see the endowment of knowledge in comrade doctor, and he has helped us understand the perspective of mining sector to Nigeria economy. A lot of it is there. Well, kudos, the government is doing its bit, but still more still need to be done. This will be the size of our show today. Till we come your way next time. I am Adefola Alamlekon. My crew and I are saying thank you for staying to ADBN television. Till we come your way next time. Have a great day.